Thief of Time, Part 5. A member of the Clockmakers Guild called on Jeremy once a week. It was nothing formal. In any case, there was often some work for him to do, or some results to be collected, because whatever else you might say about him, the boy had a genius for clocks. Informally, the visit was also a delicate way to make sure that the lad was taking his medicine and wasn't going notably crazy. The clockmakers were well aware that the intricate mechanisms of the human brain could occasionally throw a screw. The guild's members tended to be meticulous people, always in pursuit of inhuman accuracy, and this took its toll. It could cause problems. Springs were not the only things that got wound up. The guild committee were, by and large, kind and understanding men. They were not, on the whole, men accustomed to guile. Dr. Hopkins, the guild's secretary, was surprised when the door of the shop was opened by a man who appeared to have survived a very serious accident. I am here to see Mr. Jeremy," he managed. "Yes, sir. The master is in, sir." "You are... Igor, sir. Mr. Jeremy was kind enough to take me on, sir." "You work for him," said Dr. Hopkins, looking Igor up and down. "Yes, sir." Have you been standing too close to any dangerous machinery?" "No, sir. He is in the workshop there, sir." "Mr. Iger," said Dr. Hopkins, as he was ushered into the shop, "you do know that Mr. Jeremy has to take medicine, don't you?" "Yes, sir. He mentions it often." "And his general health is good, sir. He is enthusiastic for his work, sir. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed." "Bushy-tailed, eh?" said Dr. Hopkins weakly. Mr. Jeremy doesn't usually keep servants. I'm afraid he threw a clock at the head of the last assistant he had." "Really, sir?" "He hasn't thrown a clock at your head, has he?" "No, sir. He acts quite normally," said Igor, a man with 4 thumbs and stitches all around his neck. He opened the door into the workshop. "Dr. Hopkins, Mr. Jeremy, I will make some tea, sir." Jeremy was sitting bolt upright at the table, his eyes gleaming. "Ah, Doctor," he said, "how kind of you to come." Dr. Hopkins took in the workshop. There had been changes. Quite a large piece of lathe and plaster wall covered in penciled sketches had been removed from somewhere and stood on an easel on one side of the room. The benches, usually the resting place of clocks in various stages of assembly, were covered with lumps of crystal and slabs of glass. There was also a strong smell of acid. "Something new," Dr. Hopkins ventured. "Yes, Doctor, I've been examining the properties of certain super-dense crystals," said Jeremy. Dr. Hopkins took a deep breath of relief. "Ah, geology, a wonderful hobby. I'm so glad. It's not good to think about clocks all the time, you know," he added jovially and with a soup-con of hope. Jeremy's brow wrinkled as if the brain behind it was trying to fit around in an unfamiliar concept. "Yes," he said at last. "Did you know, Doctor, that copper octarate vibrates exactly 2,400,078 times a second?" "As much as that, eh?" said Dr. Hopkins. "My word." "Indeed, and the light shown through a natural prism of octavium quartz splits into only 3 colors." "Fascinating," said Dr. Hopkins, reflecting that it could be worse. "Is it me, or is there a rather sharp smell in the air?" "Drains," said Jeremy. "We've been cleaning them with acid." "Which is what we needed the acid for cleaning the drains." "Drains, eh?" Dr. Hopkins blinked. He wasn't at home in the world of drains. There was a crackling sound and a blue light flickered under the door of the kitchen. "Your man, Igor," he said. "All right, is he?" "Yes, thank you, Doctor. He's from Überwald, you know." "Oh, very big, Überwald. Very big country." That was one of the only 2 things Dr. Hopkins knew about Überwald. He coughed nervously and mentioned the other one. "People there can be a bit, strange, I've heard." "Iger says he's never had anything to do with that kind of person," said Jeremy calmly. Good. That is good," said the doctor. Jeremy's fixed smile was beginning to unnerve him. Seems to have a lot of scars and stitches." "Yes, it's cultural." "Cultural, is it?" Dr. Hopkins looked relieved. He was a man who tried to see the best in everybody, but the city had got rather complicated since he was a boy, with dwarves, trolls, and golems, and even zombies roaming about. He wasn't sure he liked everything that was happening, but a lot of it was cultural, apparently, and you couldn't really object to that, and so the doctor didn't. Cultural sort of solved problems by explaining that they weren't really there in the first place. The light under the door went out. A moment later, Igor came in with 2 cups of tea on a tray. It was good tea, the doctor had to admit, but the acid in the air was making his eyes water. So, how is this work on the new navigation tables going? Ginger biscuit, sir, said Igor by his ear. Oh, yes, these are rather good, Mr. Igor. Take 2, sir. Thank you. Now Dr. Hopkins sprayed crumbs as he spoke. The navigation tables, he repeated. I'm afraid I've not been able to make very much progress, said Jeremy. I've been engaged on other properties of crystals. Oh, yes, so you said. Well, of course, we are very grateful for any time that you feel you can spare, said Dr. Hopkins. And if I may say so, it is good to see you with a new interest. Too much concentration on one thing is conducive to ill humours of the brain. I have medicine, said Jeremy. Yes, of course, as a matter of fact, since I happen to be going past the apothecary today. Dr. Hopkins pulled a large paper-wrapped bottle out of his pocket. Thank you, Jeremy indicated the shelf behind him. As you can see, I've nearly run out. Yes, I thought you might, said Dr. Hopkins, as if the level of the bottle on Jeremy's shelf wasn't something the clockmakers kept a very careful eye on. Well, I shall be going then. Well done with the crystal. I used to collect butterflies when I was a boy. Wonderful things, hobbies. Give me a killing jar and a net, and I was happy as a little lark. Jeremy still smiled at him. There was something glassy about the smile, though. Dr. Hopkins swallowed the remainder of his tea and put the cup back on the saucer. And now I really must be on my way, he mumbled. So much to do. Don't wish to keep you from your work. Crystals, wonderful things. Very pretty. Are they? Said Jeremy. He hesitated as though he was trying to solve a minor problem. Oh, yes. Patterns of light. Twinkly, said Dr. Hopkins. Igor was waiting by the street door when Dr. Hopkins reached it. He nodded. Are you sure about the medicine? He said quietly. Oh, yes, sir. Every day I watch him pour out a spoonful. Oh, good. He can be a little, sometimes he doesn't get on well with people. Yes, sir? Well, very particular about accuracy. Yes, sir. Which is a good thing, of course. Wonderful thing, accuracy, said Dr. Hopkins and sniffed. Up to a point, of course. Well, good day to you. Good day, sir. When I got returned to the workshop, Jeremy was carefully pouring the blue medicine into a spoon. When the spoon was exactly full, he tipped it into the sink. They check, you know, he said. They think I don't notice. I'm sure they mean well, sir. I'm afraid I can't think so well when I take the medicine, he said. In fact, I think I'm getting on a lot better without it, don't you? It slows me down. Igor took refuge in silence. In his experience, many of the world's greatest discoveries were made by men who would be considered mad by conventional standards. Insanity depended on your point of view, he always said, and if it was the view through your own underpants, then everything looked fine. But young Master Jeremy was beginning to worry him. He never laughed, and Igor liked a good maniacal laugh. You could trust it. Since giving up the medicine, Jeremy had not, as Igor had expected, begun to gibber and shout things like, "Mad, they said I was mad, but I shall show them all, ha ha ha!" He'd simply become more focused. Then there was that smile. Igor was not easily frightened, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to look in a mirror, but he was becoming a little troubled. Now, where were we? Said Jeremy. Oh, yes, give me a hand here. Together they moved the table aside. Under it, a dozen of glass jars hissed. Not enough power, said Igor, although we have not got the mirror right yet, sir. Jeremy pulled the cloth off the device on the workbench. Glass and crystal glittered, and in some cases glittered very strangely. As Jeremy had remarked yesterday, in the clarity that was returning now that he was carefully pouring one spoonful of his medicine down the sink twice a day, some of the angles looked wrong. One crystal had disappeared when he locked it into place, but it was clearly still there because he could see the light reflecting off of it. And we've still got too much metal in it, sir, Igor grumbled. It was the spring that did for the last one. We'll find a way, said Jeremy. Homemade lightning is never as good as the real thought, said Igor. Good enough to test the principle, said Jeremy. Test the principle, muttered Igor. Sorry, sir, but Igor do not test the principle. Strap it to the bench and put a thick bolt of lightning. That's our motto. That's how you test something. You seem ill at ease, Igar. Well, I'm sorry, sir, said Igar. It's the climate disagreeing with me. I'm used to regular thunderstorms. I've heard that some people really seem to come alive in thunderstorms, said Jeremy, carefully adjusting the angle of a crystal. Ah, that was when I worked for Baron Finkelstein, said Igar. Jeremy stood back. This wasn't the clock, of course. There was still a lot more work to do, but he could see it in front of him if he closed his eyes, before they had a clock. This was just an essay to see if he was on the right lines. And he was. He knew it. Tick. Susan walked back through the motionless street, sat down in Mrs. Frout's office, and let herself sink back into the stream of time. She had never found out how this worked. It just did. Time didn't stop for the rest of the world, and it didn't stop for her. It was just that she entered a kind of loop of time, and everything else stayed exactly as it was until she'd finished what she needed to do. It was another inherited family trait. It worked best if you didn't think too much about it, just like tightrope walking. Anyway, now she had other things to think about. Madame Frout turned her gaze back from the rat-free mantelpiece. "Oh," she said, It seems to have gone." "It was probably a trick of the light, madam," said Susan. "Mostly mortal. Someone like me," she thought. "Yes, of course." Madame Frout managed to get her glasses on, despite the fact that the string was still tangled with the button. It meant that she'd moored herself down to her chest, but she was damned if she was going to do anything about it now. Susan could unnerve a glacier. All she had to do was sit quietly, looking polite and alert. "What precisely was it that you wanted, madam?" she said. "It is only that I've left the class doing algebra, and they get restless when they've finished." "Algebra?" said Madame Frout, perforce staring at her own bosom, which no one else had ever done. "But that's far too difficult for 7-year-olds." "Yes, but I didn't tell them that, and so far they haven't found out," said Susan. It was time to move things along. "I expect you wanted to see me about my letter, madam," she said. Madame Frout looked blank. "Well," she began. Susan sighed and snapped her fingers. She walked around and opened a drawer by the motionless Madame Frout, removed a sheet of paper, and spent some time carefully writing a letter. She let the ink dry, rustled the paper in a bit to make it look slightly second-hand, then put it just under the top of the pile of paperwork beside Madame Frout, with enough of it peeking out so that it would be easy to see. She returned to her seat and snapped her fingers again. "A letter," said Madame Frout, and then she looked down at her desk. "Oh!" It was a rather cruel thing to do, Susan knew, but while Madame Frout was not by any means a bad person and was quite kind to children in a haphazard way, she was silly, and Susan did not have time to be silly. "Yes, I asked you if I might have a few days' leave," said Susan. "Pressing family matters, I'm afraid. I've prepared some work for the children to get on with, of course." Madame Frout hesitated. Susan didn't have time for this either. She snapped her fingers. "My goodness, that'd be a relief," she said in a voice whose harmonics went all the way into the subconscious. "If we don't slow her down, we'll run out of things to teach him. She has been performing small miracles on a daily basis and deserves a raise." Then she sat down, snapped her fingers again, and watched the words settle in forefront of Madame Frouts's mind. The woman's lips actually moved. "Why, yes, of course," she murmured at last. "You've been working very hard, and there are some things even a voice of eldritch command can't achieve, and one of them is to get extra money out of a head teacher. We shall have to think about a little increment for you one of these days." Susan returned to the classroom and spent the rest of the day performing small miracles, which included removing the glue from Regenda's hair, emptying the wee out of Billy's shoe, and treating her class to a short visit to the continent of Forex. When their parents came to pick them up, they were all waving crayon pictures of kangaroos, and Susan had to hope that the red dust on their shoes and the red mud in the case of Billy's, whose sense of timing had not improved at all, would pass rather unnoticed. It probably would. Fidget's was not the only place where adults didn't see what couldn't possibly be true. Now she sat back. There was something pleasant about an empty classroom. Of course, as any teacher would point out, one nice thing was that there were no children in it, and particularly no Jason. but the tables and shelves around the room showed evidence of a term well spent. Paintings lined the walls and showed good use of perspective and color. The class had built a full-size white horse out of cardboard boxes, during which time they learned a lot about horses, and Susan learned a lot about Jason's remarkably accurate powers of observation. She had to take the cardboard tube away from him and explained that this was a polite horse. It had been a long day. She'd raised the lid of her desk and took out grim fairy tales. This dislodged some paperwork, which in turn revealed a small cardboard box decorated in black and gold. It had been a little present from Vincent's parents. She stared at the box. Every day she had to go through this. It was ridiculous. It wasn't even as if Hicks and Meekins did good chocolates. They were just butter and sugar, and she scrambled among the sad little scraps of brown paper inside the box and pulled out a chocolate. No one could be expected not to have just one chocolate, after all. She put it in her mouth. Damn! There was nougat inside. Her one chocolate today, and it was damn artificial, damn pink and white, damn sickly, damn stupid nougat. Well, no one could be expected to believe that counted. She was entitled to another. This is true. A chocolate you did not want to eat does, in fact, not count as chocolate. This discovery is from the same branch of culinary physics that determined that food eaten while walking along contains absolutely no calories. The teacher part of her, which had eyes in the back of its head, caught the blur of movement. She spun around. No running with scythe. The death of rats stopped jogging along the nature table and gave her a rather guilty look. Squeak! And no going into the stationery cupboard either, said Susan automatically. She slammed the desk lid shut. Squeak! Yes, you were. I could hear you thinking about it. It was possible to deal with the death of rats, provided you thought of him as a very small Jason. The stationery cupboard. That was one of the great battlegrounds of classroom history, that and the playhouse. But the ownership of the playhouse usually sorted itself out without Susan's intervention, so that all she had to do was to be ready with ointment, a nose blow, and mild sympathy for the losers, whereas the stationery cupboard was war of attrition. It contained pots of powder paint, reams of paper, and boxes of crayons, and more idiosyncratic items like a spare pair of pants for Billy, who did his best. It also contained the scissors, which under classroom rules were treated as some kind of doomsday machine, and of course the boxes of stars. The only people allowed in the cupboard were Susan and, usually, Vincent. Despite everything Susan had tried, short of actually decapitation, he was always the official best at everything, and won the coveted honor every single day, which was to go into the stationery cupboard and fetch the pencils and hand them out. For the rest of the class, and especially Jason, the stationery cupboard was some mystic magic realm to be entered whenever it was actually possible. Honestly, thought Susan, once you learned the arts of defending the stationery cupboard, outwitting Jason, and keeping the class pet alive until the end of term, you mastered at least half of what there was to learn of teaching. She signed the register, watered the sad plant on the windowsill, went and fetched some fresh privet from the hedge for the stick insects that were successors to Henry the hamster, chosen on the basis that it was quite hard to tell when they were dead. Tidied a few errant crayons away and looked around the classroom at all those little chairs. It sometimes worried her that nearly every one she knew was well 3 feet high. She was never certain that she trusted her grandfather at times like this. It was all to do with the rules. He couldn't interfere, but he knew her weakness, and he could wind her up and send her out into the world. Someone like me. Yes, he'd known how to engage her interest. Someone like me. Suddenly there's some dangerous clock somewhere in the world, and suddenly I'm told there's someone like me. Someone like me, except not like me. At least I knew my parents. And she listened to Death's account of the tall, dark woman wandering from room to room in the endless castle of glass, weeping for the child she'd given birth to and could see every day, but could never touch. Where do I even begin? Tick. Lobsang learned a lot. He learned that every room had at least 4 corners. He learned that the sweepers started work when the sky was light enough to see dust and continued until sunset. As a master, Lutze was kind enough. He would always point out those bits that Lobsang had not done properly. After the initial anger and the taunting of his former classmates, Lobsang found that the work had a certain charm to it. Days drifted by under his broom, until, almost with an audible click in his brain, he decided that enough was enough. He finished his section of pathway and found Lutze dreamily pushing his brush along a terrace. "Sweeper." "Yes, lad. What is it you're trying to tell me?" "I'm sorry. I didn't expect to become a sweeper. You're Lutze. I expected to be apprenticed to a hero." "You did?" Lutze scratched his beard. "Oh dear. Damn, yes, I can see the problem. You should have said. Why didn't you say? I really don't do that sort of thing anymore." "You don't? All of that playing with history, running about unsettling people? No, not really. I was never quite certain we should be doing it, to be honest. No, sweeping is good enough for me. There's something real about a nice, clean floor." "This is a test, isn't it?" said Lobsang coldly. "Oh, yes. I mean, I understand how it works. The master makes the pupil do all the menial jobs, and then it turns out that really the pupil is learning things of great value, and I don't think I'm learning anything. Really, except that people are pretty messy and inconsiderate." "Not a bad lesson all the same," said Lutze. "Is it not written, hard work never did anybody any harm?" "Where is this written, Lutze?" said Lobsang, thoroughly exasperated. The sweeper brightened up. "Ah," he said, "perhaps the pupil is ready to learn. Then you don't wish to know the way of the sweeper. You wish to learn instead the way of Mrs. Cosmopolity." "Who?" "We have swept well. Let's go to the gardens. Is it not written, 'It does you good to get out in the fresh air'?" "Is it?" said Lobsang, still bewildered. Lutze pulled a small tattered notebook out of his pocket. "In here it is," he said. "I should know." Tick. Lutze patiently adjusted a tiny mirror to redirect sunlight more favorably on one of the bonsai mountains. He hummed tunelessly under his breath. Lobsang, sitting cross-legged on the stones, carefully turned the yellowing pages of the ancient notebook on which was written in faded ink, "The way of Mrs. Cosmopolity." "Well," said Lutze, "the way has an answer for everything, doesn't it?" "Yes." "Then," Lobsang nodded at the little volcano, which was gently smoking, "how does that work? It's on a saucer." Lutze stared straight ahead, his lips moving. "Page 76, I think," he said. Lobsang turned to the page. "Because," he read. "Good answer," said Lutze, gently caressing a minute crack with a camel hair brush. "Just because, master. No reason." "Reason? What reason can a mountain have? And as you accumulate years, you will learn that most answers boil down, eventually, to because." Lobsang said nothing. The Book of the Way was giving him problems. What he wanted to say was this: "Lutze, this reads like a book of sayings of an old lady. It's the sort of thing old ladies say. What kind of koan is? It won't get better if you pick at it, or eat it up, it'll make your hair curly, or everything comes to he who waits. This is stuff you get in Hogwarts crackers." "Really?" said Lutze, still apparently engrossed in the mountain. I didn't say anything." "Oh, I thought you did. Do you miss Ankh-Morpork?" "Yes, I didn't have to sweep floors there." "Were you a good thief?" "I was a fantastic thief." A breeze blew a scent of cherry blossom. Just once, thought Lutze, it would be nice to actually pick the cherries. "I've been to Ankh-Morpork," he said, straightening up and moving on to the next mountain. "You've seen the visitors we get here." "Yes," said Lobsang. "Everyone laughs at them." "Really?" Lutze raised his eyebrows. "When they have trekked thousands of miles seeking the truth. But did not Wen say that if the truth is anywhere, it is everywhere?" said Lobsang. "Well done. I see you've learned something at least. But one day it seemed to me that everyone else had decided that wisdom can only be found a long way off. So I went to Ankh-Morpork. They were all coming here, so it only seemed fair." "Seeking enlightenment?" "No, the wise man does not seek enlightenment, he waits for it. So while I was waiting, it occurred to me that seeking perplexity might be more fun, said Lutze. After all, enlightenment begins where perplexity ends, and I found perplexity and a kind of enlightenment too. I had not been there 5 minutes, for example, when some men in an alley tried to enlighten me of what little I possessed, giving me a valuable lesson in the ridiculousness of material things. But why Ankh-Morpork, said Lobsang. Look in the back of the book, said Lutze. There was a yellow crackling scrap of paper tucked in there. The boy unfolded it. Oh, this is just a bit of the almanac, he said. It's very popular there. Yes, the seeker after wisdom left it here. It's just got the faces of the moon on this page. Other side, said the sweeper. Lobsang turned the page over. It's just an advert from the Ankh-Morpork Guild of Merchants, said Lobsang. Ankh-Morpork has everything. He stared at the smiling Lutze. And you thought that... Ah, I am old and simple and understand, said the sweeper, whereas you are young and complicated. Didn't Wen see portents of the swirl of drool in his bowl and the flight of birds? This was actually written. Flights of birds are quite complex, but these were words. And I saw the opening of the way. My way. And you went all the way to Ankh-Morpork, said Lobsang weakly. And I fetched up calm of mind, but empty of pocket, in Quirm Street, said the sweeper, smiling serenely at the recollection. And espied a sign in a window saying rooms to rent, and thus I met Mrs. Cosmopolite, who opened the door when I knocked. And then when I hesitated, not being sure of the language, she said, I haven't got all day, you know. Almost to a word, one of the sayings of Wen. Instantly I knew that I had found what I was seeking. During the days I washed dishes in an eating house for 20 pence apiece, and all the scraps I could take away, and in the evenings I helped Mrs. Cosmopolite clean the house and listened carefully to her conversation. She was a natural sweeper with good rhythmical motion and had bottomless wisdom. Within the first 2 days she uttered me to the actual words set by Wen upon understanding the true nature of time. It was when I asked for a reduced rate, because of course I did not sleep in a bed, and she said I was not born yesterday, Mr. Tse. Astonishing, and she could have seen the sacred texts. Lobsang's face was a carefully drawn picture. I was not born yesterday, he said. Ah, yes, of course, as a novice you would not have got that far, said Lutze. It was when he fell asleep in a cave and in a dream saw time appear to him and show him that the universe is recreated from second to second, endlessly. And he stepped out from the cave into the truly new world and said, I was not born yesterday. Oh, yes, said Lobsang, but Miss Cosmopolite, said Lutze, his eyes misting over. What a woman for keeping things clean. If she was a sweeper here, no one would be allowed to walk on the floor. Her house, so amazing, a palace, new sheets every other week, and cook, just to taste her beans baked upon the toast. A man would give her a cycle of the universe. Said Lobsang. I stayed for 3 months, sweeping her house as is fitting for the pupil, and then I returned here, my way clear before me. And, these stories about you, all true, most of them. A bit of exaggeration, but mostly true. The one about the citadel in Muntab and the Pash and the fishbone? Yes. But how did you get in where half a dozen trained and armed men couldn't even... I'm a little man and I carry a broom, said Lutze simply. Everyone has some mess that needs clearing up. What harm is a man with a broom? What? And that was it? Well, the rest was a matter of cookery, really. The Pash was not a good man, but he was a glutton for his fish pie. So, no martial arts, said Lobsang. Always a last resort. History needs shepherds, not butchers. Do you know okidoki? Just a lot of bunny hops. Shiitake? If I wanted to thrust my hand into hot sand, I would go to the seaside. Upsy-daisy. No ways to good bricks. No kando? You made that one up. Tung pi. Bad-tempered flower arrangement. Déjà vu. That got a reaction. Lutze's eyebrows raised. Déjà vu. You heard that rumor. Time as a weapon, he said. Ha! None of the monks here knows déjà vu. I'd soon hear about it if they did. Look, boy, violence is the resort of the violent. In most tight corners, a broomstick suffices. Only most, eh? Said Lopsang, not trying to hide the sarcasm. Oh, I see. You wish to face me in the dojo, for it is a very old truth. When the pupil can beat the master, there's nothing the master cannot tell him, because the apprenticeship has ended. You want to learn? I knew there was something to learn. Lutze stood up. Why you? He said. Why here? Why now? There's a time and place for everything. Why this time and this place? If I take you to the dojo, you will return what you stole from me now. He looked down at the teak table where he worked on his mountains. The little shovel was there. A few cherry blossom petals fluttered to the ground. I see. You are that fast, and I did not see you. Lopsang said nothing. It is a small and worthless thing, said Lutze. Why did you take it, please? To see if I could. I was bored. Ah, we shall see if we can make life more interesting for you then. No wonder you were bored when you can already slice time like that. Lutze turned the little shovel over and over in his hand. Very fast, he said. He leaned down and blew the petals away from the tiny glacier. You sliced time as fast as the 10th Jim, and as yet barely trained. You must have been a great thief. And now, oh dear, I shall have to face you in the dojo. No, there is no need, said Lopsang, because now Lutze looked frightened and humiliated and somehow small and brittle-boned. I insist, said the old man. Let us get it done now, for it is written, there is no time like the present which Miss Cosmopolite most profound understanding. He sighed and looked up at the giant statue of Wen, which loomed over the terrace. Look at him, he said. He was a lad, eh? Completely blissed out on the universe, saw the past and the future as one living person and wrote the books of history to tell how the story should go. We can't imagine what those eyes saw, and he never raised a hand to any man in his life. Look, I really didn't want to. And you looked at the other statues, said Lutze, as if he completely forgotten about the dojo entirely. Distractedly, Lopsang followed his gaze. Up the raised stone platform that ran the whole length of the gardens were hundreds of smaller statues, mostly carved of wood, all of them painted with garish colors. Figures with more eyes than legs, more tails than teeth, monstrous amalgamations of fish, squid, tiger, parsnip, things put together as if the creator of the universe had tipped out his box of square parts and stuck them all together. Things painted pink, orange, and purple and gold looked down over the valley. Oh, the Dalang, Lopsang began. Demons? Ah, that is one word for them, said the sweeper. The abbot called them the enemies of mind. Wen wrote a scroll about them, and he said that was the worst. He pointed to a little hooded grey shape which looked out of place among the festival of wild extremities. Doesn't look very dangerous, said Lopsang. Look, sweeper, I don't want to. They can be very dangerous, things that don't look dangerous, said Lutze. Not looking dangerous is what makes them dangerous, for it is written, you can't tell a book by its cover. Lutze, I really don't want to fight you. Oh, your tutors will tell you that discipline of the martial art enables you to slice time, and that's true, as far as it goes, said Lutze, apparently not listening at all. But so can sweeping, and perhaps you have found. Always find the perfect moment, Wen said. People just seem so keen on using it to kick other people on the back of the neck. But it wasn't a challenge. I just wanted you to show me. And I shall. Come on, I made a bargain. I must keep it, old fool that I am. The nearest dojo was the dojo of the 10th Jim. It was empty, except for two monks blurring as they danced across the mat and wrapped time around themselves. Lutze had been right, Lopsang knew. Time was a resource. You could learn to let it move fast or slow, so that a monk could easily walk through a crowd and yet be moving so fast that no one could see him. Or he could stand still for a few seconds and watch the sun and moon chase one another across a flickering sky. He could meditate for a day, in a minute. Here in the valley, a day lasted forever. The blurred fighters became a couple of hesitant monks when they saw Lutze. He bowed. I beg the use of this dojo for a short period while my apprentice teaches me the folly of old age, he said. I really didn't mean, Lopsang began, but Lutze elbowed him in the ribs. The monks gave the old man a nervous look. It's yours, Lutze, said one of them. They hurried out, almost tripping over their own feet as they kept looking back. Time and its control is what we should teach here, said Lutze, watching them go. The martial arts are an aid. That's all they are. At least that's all they were meant to be. Even out in the world, a well-trained person may perceive in the fray how flexible time may be. Here, we build on that. Compress time, stretch time, hold the moment. Punching people's kidneys out through their nose is only a foolish byproduct. Lutze took down a razor-edged picast sword from the rack and handed it to the shocked boy. You've seen one of these before. They are not really for novices, but you shall promise. Yes, sweeper, but know how to use it. I'm good at the practice one, but they're just made of take it then and attack me. There was a rustling noise above them. Lobsang looked up and saw the monks pouring into the observation gallery above the dojo. There were some very senior ones among them too. News get around quickly in a very little world. Rule number 2, said Lutze, is never refuse a weapon. He took a few steps back. In your own time, boy. Lobsang wielded the curved sword uncertainly. Well, said Lutze, I can't just... Is this the dojo of the 10th gym? Said Lutze. Why, mercy me, I do believe it is. That means there are no rules, doesn't it? Any weapons, any strategy, anything is allowed. Do you understand? Are you stupid? But I can't kill someone just because they've asked me to. Why not? What happens to Mr. Manners? But you are holding a deadly weapon. You are facing an unarmed man in a pose of submission. Are you frightened? Yes I am. Good, that's rule 3, said Lutze quietly. See how much you're learning already. Wipe the smile off your face, if I. All right, put the sword on the rack and take a dagger stick. The most you can do with that is bruise my old bones. I would prefer if you wore the protective padding. You're that good with the stick, are you? I'm very fast. Then if you don't fight right now, I shall wrest it from you and break it over your head, said Lutze, drawing back. Ready? The only defense is to attack well, I'm told. Lobsang raised the stick in a reluctant salute. Lutze folded his hands as Lobsang danced towards him, closed his eyes, and smiled to himself. Lobsang raised the stick and hesitated. Lutze was grinning. Rule 3, Rule 2. What had been rule number 1? Always remember rule 1. Lutze! The abbot's chief acolyte arrived, panting in the doorway, waving urgently. Lutze opened one eye and then the other, and then winked at Lobsang. Narrow escape there, eh? He said. She turned to the acolyte. Yes, exalted sir. You must come immediately, and all monks were cleared for a tour in the world, to the Mandala Hall, now. There was a scuffling in the gallery, and several monks pushed their way out through the crowd. Ah, excitement, said Lutze, taking the stick from Lobsang's unresisting hands and putting it back on the rack. The hall was emptying fast. Around the hole of Oi Dong, gongs were being banged frantically. What's happening? Said Lobsang as the last of the monks surged past. I dare say we shall soon be told, said Lutze, starting to roll himself a cigarette. Hadn't we better hurry? Everyone's going. The sound of flapping sandals died away in the distance. Nothing seems to be on fire, said Lutze calmly. Besides, if we wait a little time, then by the time we get there everyone will have stopped shouting, and perhaps they will be making some sense. Let us take the clock path. The display is particularly fine at this time of day. But it is written, you got to learn to walk before you can run, said Lutze, putting his broom over his shoulder. Miss Cosmopolite again. Amazing woman, dusted like a demon too. The clock path wound out from the main complex up through the terraced gardens, and then rejoined the wider path as it tunneled into the cliff wall. Novices always asked why it was called the clock path, since there was no sign of a clock anywhere. More gongs started to bang, but they were muffled by the greenery. Lobsang heard more running feet up the main path. Down here, hummingbirds flickered from flower to flower, oblivious to the excitement. I wonder what time it is, said Lutze, who was walking ahead. Everything was a test. Lobsang glanced around at the flower bed. 9:15, he said. Oh? How do you know that? The field marigold is open, the red sandwort is opening, the purple bindweed is closed, and the yellow goat's beard is closing, said Lobsang. You worked out the floral clock all by yourself. Yes, it's obvious. Really? What time is it when the white water lily opens? 6 in the morning. You came to look. Yes, you planted this garden, didn't you? One of my little efforts. It's beautiful. That's not very accurate in the small hours. There aren't too many night-blooming plants that grow well up here. They open for the moth, you know. It's how time wants to be measured, said Lobsang. Really? Of course I'm not an expert, said Lutze. He pinched out the end of his cigarette and stuck it behind his ear. Oh well, let's keep going. Everyone may have stopped arguing at cross purposes now. How do you feel about going through the Mandala Hall again? Oh, I'll be fine. I just, forgotten about it, that's all. Really? And you'd never seen it before, too? But time plays funny tricks on us all. Why, I once... Lutze stopped and stared at the apprentice. Are you all right? He said. You're going pale. Lobsang grimaced and shook his head. Something felt odd, he said. He vaguely waved a hand in the direction of the lowlands, spread out in a blue and grey pattern over the horizon. Something over there. The glass clock. The great glass house, and here where it shouldn't be. The glass clock. It was barely here. It showed up as shimmering lines in the air, as if it was possible to capture the sparkle of light of a shiny surface without the surface itself. Everything here was transparent, delicate chairs, tables, vases of flowers, and now he realized that glass was not a word to use here. Crystal might be better, or ice, the thin, flawless ice you sometimes got after a sharp frost. Everything was visible only by its edges. He could make out staircases through distant walls. Above and below, to every side, the glass rooms went on and on forever. Yet it was all familiar. It felt like home. Sound filled the glass rooms. It streamed away in clear, sharp notes, like the tones made by a wet finger around a wine glass's rim. There was movement, too, a haze in the air beyond the transparent walls, shifting, wavering, and watching him. How can it come from over there, and how do you mean odd? Said the voice of Lutze. Lobsang blinked. This was the odd place, the one right here, the rigid and unbending world. And then the feeling passed and faded. Just odd for a moment, he mumbled. There was dampness on his cheek. He raised his hands and touched the wetness. It's that rancid yak butter they put in the tea. I've always said so, said Lutze. Miss Cosmopolity never. Now, that is unusual, he said, looking up. What? Said Lobsang, looking blankly at his wet fingertips, and then up at the cloudless sky. A procrastinator going over speed. He shifted a position. Can't you feel it? I can't feel anything, said Lobsang. Not here. Feel. Coming up through your sandals. Oops, there goes another one. And another one. You can't feel it. That's old 66. They've never got it properly balanced. We'll hear them in a minute. Oh dear, look at the flowers. Do look at the flowers. The ice plants were opening. The field sow thistle was closing. Time leak, said Lutze. Hark at that. You can hear them now, eh? They're dumping time randomly. Oh, come on. According to the second scroll of When the Eternally Surprised soared the first procrastinator from the trunk of a wam-wam tree, carved certain symbols on it, fitted it with bronze spindle, and summoned the apprentice Clotpool. Ah, very nice, master, said Clotpool. A prayer wheel, yes. No, this is nothing like as complex, said Wen. It merely stores and moves time. That's simple, eh? And now I shall test it, said Wen. He gave it a half-turn with his hand. Ah, very nice, said Clotpool. A prayer wheel, yes. No, this is nothing like as complex, said Wen. It merely stores and moves time. That's simple, eh? And now I shall test it, said Wen. He moved a little less this time. That's simple, eh? And now I shall test it, said Wen. This time he twisted it gently to and fro. That's simple, eh? Said Clotpool. And I have tested it, said Wen. It worked, master. Yes, I think so, Wen stood up. Give me the rope that you used to carry all the firewood. And, yes, a pit from one of those cherries that you picked yesterday. He wound the frayed rope round the cylinder, tossed the pit onto a patch of mud. Clotpool jumped out of the way. See those mountains, said Wen, tucking the rope. The cylinder spun and balanced there, humming gently. Oh, yes, master. said Clotpool obediently. There was practically nothing up here but mountains. There were so many that sometimes they were impossible to see because they themselves got in the way. How much time does a stone need, said Wynne, or the deep sea? We shall move it. He placed his left hand just above the spinning blur, to where it is needed. He looked down at the cherry pit. His lips moved silently, as though he was working through some complex puzzle. Then he pointed his right hand at the pit. Stand back, he said, and gently let a finger touch the cylinder. There was no sound except the crack of the air as it moved aside and a hiss of steam from the mud. Wen looked up at the new tree and smiled. I did say you should stand back, he said. I shall get down now then, shall I? Said a voice among the blossom-laden branches. But carefully, said Wen, and sighed as Clotpool crashed down in a shower of petals. There will always be cherry blossoms here, he said. Lutze hitched up his robe and scurried back down the path. Lopsang ran after him. A high-pitched whine seemed to be coming out of the rocks themselves. The sweeper skidded at the carpool, now erupting in strange waves, and headed down a shady track alongside a stream. Red ibises erupted into flight. He stopped and threw himself flat on the paving slabs. Get down now! But Lapsang was already headlong. He heard something pass overhead with a plangent sound. He looked back and saw the last ibis tumbling in the air, shedding feathers and shrinking as it flew. It squawked and vanished with a... Not vanished entirely. An egg followed the same trajectory for a few seconds and then smashed on the stones. Random time! Come on! Shouted Lutze. He scrambled to his feet again, headed toward the ornamental grill in the cliff face ahead of them, and with surprising strength wrenched it out of the wall. It's a bit of a drop, but if you roll when you land you'll be okay, he said, lowering himself into the hole. Where does it go to? The procrastinators, of course. But novices aren't allowed there under pain of death. That's a coincidence, said Lutze, lowering himself to the tips of his fingers, because death is what awaits you if you stay out here too. He dropped into the darkness. A moment later, there was an unenlightened curse from below. Lopsang climbed in, hung by his fingertips, and dropped and rolled when he hit the floor below. Well done, said Lutze in the gloom. When in doubt, choose to live. This way. The passageway opened into a wide corridor. The noise here was shattering. Something mechanical was in agony. There was a crump, and a few moments after, a babble of voices. Several monks wearing thick cork hats, as well as their traditional robes, came running around the corner. Most of them were yelling. A few of the brighter ones were saving their breath in order to cover the ground more quickly. Lutze grabbed one of them, who tried to struggle free. Let me go! What's happening? Just get out of here before they all go! The monk shook himself free and sped after the rest of them. Lutze bent down, picked up a fallen cork helmet, and solemnly handed it to Lopsang. Health and safety at work, he said. Very important. Will that protect me? Said Lopsang, while putting it on. Not really, but when they find your head, it may be recognizable. When we get into the hall, don't touch anything. Lopsang had been expecting some vaulted, magnificent structure. People talked about the Procrastinator Hall as if it was some huge cathedral. But there it was, at the end of the passage, a haze of blue smoke. It was only when his eyes got accustomed to the swirling gloom that he saw the nearest cylinder. It was a squat pillar of rock about 3 yards across and 6 yards high. It was spinning so fast that it was a blur. Around it, the air flickered with slivers of silver blue light. See, they're dumping! Over here! Quick! He ran after Lutze and saw that there were hundreds, no thousands of cylinders, some of them reaching all the way to the cavern roofs. There were still monks in here. Some of them were running to and fro from the wells with buckets of water which flashed into steam when they threw it over the smoking stone bearings at the base of the cylinders. Idiots, the sweeper muttered. He cupped his hands and shouted, Where is the overseer? Lopsang pointed down to the edge of a wooden podium built into the wall at the end of the hall. Rotting cork hat there and a pair of ancient sandals. And in between was a pile of grey dust. Poor fellow, said Lutze. A full 50,000 years in one jolt, I'd say. He glared at the scurrying monks again. Will you lot stop and come here? I ain't going to ask you twice. Several of them swept the sweat out of their eyes and trotted toward the podium, relieved to hear any kind of order, while behind them the procrastinators screamed. Right, said Lutze, as they were joined by more and more. Now listen to me. This is just a surge cascade. You've all heard of them. We can deal with it. We just have to cross-link futures and past. Fastest one first. Poor Mr. Choplang already tried that, said a monk. He nodded at the sad pile. Then I want 2 teams, Lutze stopped. No, we haven't got time. We'll do it by the soles of our feet like we used to. 1 man to a spinner, just smack the bars when I say. Ready to go when I call the numbers. Lutze climbed in onto the podium and ran his eye over a board covered with wooden bobbins. A red, a blue nimbus hovered over each one. What a mess, he said. What a mess. What do they mean, said Lobsang. Lutze's hands hovered over the bobbins. Okay, the red ones are winding time out, speeding it up, he said. The blue tinted ones, they're winding time in, slowing it down. Brightness of the color, that's how fast they're doing it. Except that now they're all freewheeling because the surge cut them loose, understand? Loose from what? Loose from the load, from the world. See up there? He waved a hand towards 2 long racks that ran all the way along the cavern wall. Each one held a row of swiveling shutters, 1 line blue, 1 line red. The more shutters showing a color, the more time winding or unwinding. Good lad, got to keep it balanced, and the way we get through this is we couple the spinners up in 2 so that they wind and unwind one another, cancel themselves out. Poor old Choplang was trying to put them back into service, I reckon. Can't be done not doing a cascade. We've got to let it all fall over, then pick up the pieces when it's nice and quiet. He glanced at the bobbins and then at the crowd of monks. Right, you! 100 to 17, then 45 to 89. Off you go, and you! 596 to, let's see, yes, 402. 790, shouted Lobsang, pointing to a bobbin. You what? 790. Don't be daft, that's still unwinding, lads. 402 is our man right here. 790 is about to start winding time again. It's still bright blue. It's going to wind, I know it, because... The novice's finger moved over the lines of bobbins, hesitated, pointed to a bobbin on the other side of the board. It's matching speeds with this one. Lutze peered. It is written while I go to the foot of our stairs, he said. They are forming a natural inversion. He squinted at Lobsang. You're not the reincarnation of someone, are you? That happens a lot in these parts. I don't think so. It's just obvious. A moment ago you didn't know anything about these. Yes, but when you see them, it's obvious. Is it? Is it? All right, then the board's yours, Wonder Boy. Lutze stood back. Mine, but I get on with it. That is an order. For a moment, there was a suggestion of blue light around Lobsang. Lutze wondered how much time he folded around himself in that second. Time enough to think, certainly. Then the boy called out 6 pairs of numbers. Lutze turned to the monks. Jump to it, boys. Mr. Lobsang has the board. You boys just watch those bearings. But he's a novice, one of the monks began and stopped, backed away when he saw Lutze's expression. All right, sweeper, all right. A moment later, there was the sound of jumpers slamming into place. Lobsang called out another set of numbers, while the monks dashed to and fro to the bottom pits for grease. Lutze looked up at the nearest column. It was still spinning fast, but he was sure he could see the carvings. Lobsang ran his eye over the board again, stared up the rumbling cylinders, and then back to the lines of shutters. There wasn't anything written down about all this, Lutze knew. You couldn't teach it in a classroom, although they actually tried. A good spin driver learned it through the soles of his feet for all the theory that they taught you these days. He learned to feel the flows, to see the rows of procrastinators as well as fountains of time. Old Choplang had been so good that he'd been able to pull a couple of hours of wasted time off of a classroom of bored pupils without them even noticing, and dump it into a busy workshop 1,000 miles away as neat as you pleased. And then there was that trick he used to do with an apple to amaze the apprentices. He'd put it on a pillar next to them and then flick time at it off of one of those small spindles. In an instant it would be a collection of small spindly trees before crumbling to dust. That's what'll happen to you if you get the things wrong, he said. Lutze glanced down at the piles of grey dust under the disintegrating hat as he hurried past. Well, maybe it was the way he wanted to go. A scream of tormented stone made him look up. Keep those bearing greased, you lazy devils, he yelled, and running down on the rows. And watch those rails, hands off the splines, we're doing fine. As he ran, he kept his eyes on the columns. They weren't turning randomly now. Now, they had a purpose. I think you're winning, lad, he shouted to the figure on the podium. Yes, but I can't balance it. There's too much time wound up and nowhere to put it. How much? Almost 40 years. Lutze glanced at the shutters. 40 years looked about right, but surely. How much? He said. 40. I'm sorry. There's nothing to take it up. No problem. Steal it. Shed load. We can always pull it back later. Dump it. Where to? I found a big patch of sea. The sweeper pointed to a crude map of the world painted on the wall. Do you know how to... Can you see how to give it to the right spin and direction? Once again, there was blueness in the air. Yes, I think so. Yes, I imagine you do. In your own time, then. Lutze shook his head. 40 years. He was worried about 40 years. 40 years was nothing. Apprentice drivers had dumped 50,000 years before now. That was the thing about the sea. It just stayed big and wet. It had always been big and wet, and likely it was always going to be big and wet. Oh, maybe fishermen would start to dredge up a strange whiskery fish that they'd only seen before as fossils, but who cared what happened to a bunch of codfish? The sound changed. What are you doing? He shouted. I found a space on number 422. It can take another 40 years. No sense in wasting time. I'm putting it back now. There was another change of tone. Got it. I'm sure I've got it. Some of the bigger cylinders were already slowing to a halt. Lopsang was moving pegs around the board now faster than the bewildered Lutze could follow. Overhead, the shutters were slamming back one after another, showing aged, blackened wood instead of color. No one could be that accurate, could they? You're down to month now, lads. Month, he shouted. Keep it up. Oh, blimey, you're down to days. Days, keep an eye on me. The sweeper ran toward the end of the hall, to where the procrastinators were smaller. Time was fine-tuned here on cylinders of chalk and wood and other rather short-lived materials. To his amazement, some of them were already slowing. He raced down an aisle of oak columns a few feet high, but even the procrastinators that could wind time in hours and minutes were falling silent. There was a squeaking noise. Beside him, one final little chalk cylinder at the end of the row rattled around on its bearing like a spinning top. Lutze crept toward it, staring at it intently, one hand raised. The squeaking was the only sound now, apart from the occasional clink of the cooling bearings. Nearly there, he called out, slowing down now. Wait for it, wait for it. The chalk procrastinator, no bigger than a reel of cotton, slowed, spun, and stopped. On the racks, the last two shutters closed. Lutze's hand fell. Now kill the board! No one touch anything! For a moment, there was dead silence in the hall. The monks watched, holding their breath. This was a timeless moment of perfect balance.